Hey folks, Malforian here, and today we're covering Dev Diary 151 Landless Adventurers Part 1. There is a sequel to this coming next week with a lot more information as well, similar to how they did the admin government Dev Diaries. I will say right off the bat, this is a huge Dev Diary. As always, I will try condense it down as much as I can in this video. I will say there's a lot of changes coming to this. I kind of thought Landless Adventurers might be like additional events, some other small mechanics or something like that, but as we will discover during this Dev Diary, there's a lot of the game that's getting contextual reworks just to fit into this system. So lifestyles, for example, are getting a redo if you are a landless character. There's a bunch of things. We're going to cover most of it in this video. As I said, next week they're going to go into more information about some of the specific changes as well. So there's more to come in the future. As always, they do call out here, especially in this case, the balancing hasn't been completed on this. So you will see some figures, maybe some gold rewards from contracts you're going to see later on, and some other things about prestige. All this kind of number balancing hasn't been finished yet, so don't worry about it too much. That will get more passes before it comes out, and I'm sure it will be perfectly balanced when released. The first thing they're going to show off here, and we have seen this before, is the actual UI for your camp. It looks amazing. It looks like a medieval tapestry kind of style, and I think this looks awesome. As we've seen from this one, and I think it was shown off in the admin government type as well, it does look like it changes depending on where you are. So this camp is in a forest, I would presume, from this picture. So it looks more forested. I think we saw one previously where they were in mountains or hills, and it looks slightly different as well. So it does look like there are different versions of this depending on where your camp is located. We'll get into camp moving later on the Dev Diary as well. As I said, a lot of information this week. The first thing, though, they're going to cover is why adventurers. I'm not going to read through all this. I will say they basically talk here that in the DLC, originally when they were planning it, it ended up being very Byzantine and admin focused. Obviously, that is something that people have been looking forward to, but they didn't want the expansion to just be Byzantine and admin. They wanted something different, and Landless Adventurers is what they decided on because they could take a lot of the systems they built for admin play and the Byzantines, rework them slightly and have them work for this landless adventurer gameplay. As we go through the Dev Diary, you will see things that kind of tie in to how these systems work elsewhere. So they've kind of reused that system in a different way. The gameplay is totally different, but they have used it as like the backbone of this different kind of gameplay. That is why they ultimately decided on landless gameplay. As we do have landless nobles in the Byzantines, landless adventurers elsewhere in the world was a logical continuation of that system. I will call out now, it is mentioned in the comments down below as well, that landless adventurers and the admin government type are both paid DLC features. They're not actually free. They do, however, say that a lot of these systems can be used by modders for the vanilla game. So it looks like mods can make use of all these systems, but the actual non-DLC players won't interact with much of this outside of seeing the AI occasionally using it and things like that. So I just wanted to call that out early on. And as we can see in this next screenshot, you see your camp on the map itself, and then you can see like these little squares elsewhere. These are the different contracts that you can travel to, pick up these contracts, and then try and complete those for rewards. That is covered later on the Dev Diary, but I just wanted to point it out on the map. I think they stand out pretty nicely on that if you are playing a landless character. The other thing they called out here is why did they do landless characters versus doing nomads? They do say they are actually going to do nomads in the future. They just wanted to have them as their own DLC to shine. So maybe that's going to be almost like a flavor pack DLC or something like that, not a full expansion like this one is. It looks like maybe that will be a smaller one, and they could do all the nomad rework and things like that in there. So this isn't cutting off nomads, this kind of gameplay. This is separate to it, and they did thankfully call out that nomads will get a rework in the future. But with all that being said, what is their vision for Unlanded Adventurers? As they've already said, playing Unlanded is very different to playing normal Crusader Kings. That is all about marriage, inheritance, building up a realm politics, vassals, lieges, all this kind of stuff. And for the most part, you don't have that as a landless character. You do have marriage and inheritance. They're going to cover that later on. But obviously, you don't have vassals and things like that either. You have a much smaller court. They are called followers instead, and they're going to cover that later on as well. The main vision they had, though, is for this to be the ultimate underdog story that you can play out. You are an outsider with no land or prospects, also no responsibilities or restrictions. You can go pretty much wherever you want in the map, and we'll see that later on. A landed character, even the lowest baron, which is funny as you can't play them, has a host of functionaries and regular income from taxable subjects, but they also have the pressures of rule that they can't escape. The rigors of ritual and silent formality soak up their time and energy. You are stuck in that rigid system. As an unlanded character, you could just go off and have your own adventures. And they show here, this is obviously the UI for when you're starting a new character. You can create your own adventurer, create your own ruler, or just start. I will say they do call out later on that yes, we are getting a El Cid bookmark start. So it looks like there's going to be a bunch of characters in that bookmark that you might want to play landless. I'm sure a lot of you are going to play as El Cid, though, and they did want to call that out that is coming with the launch of the DLC. As an adventurer lacks the benefits of being a landed character, but there are also no demands to how they choose their time. They're able to amass power through hard work and skill rather than privilege and history. If you so choose, you can translate this power into a dramatic entrance onto the landed stage. So as you build up your prestige, your contacts and things like that, you can get to the point where you can ask for land off somebody that's powerful enough, and potentially they will give that to you. And that is how you enter the landed stage. And obviously, if you've built up a bunch of money and things like that before you do so, you can have a nice jump start to being a landed character at that point. They also wanted to reflect this kind of relaxed philosophy in a more playstyle focus to traveling and roaming, encouraging you to experience the map in different ways rather than just moving across it with armies and things like that. Occasionally, you'll stop in a realm to influence it in some ways. They wanted the camp to feel more intimate than your court, to have less characters, but them be more memorable. After all, a traveling adventure band, your followers are your resource, and you will see them literally every day. So you do have less people than your court, and obviously because you have less of them, you get to know them better in a way. And then if bad things happen to them, I think you're going to feel it that little bit more rather than kind of Marshal number 5 dies. Well, I'm just going to replace it with somebody else. In this case, you aren't going to be able to replace people easily, and you're also going to remember that character, I think, a little bit more, because it is you and your adventuring band trying to do well in the world and seeing how well that plays out. Naturally, a core part of this gameplay is forming a strong mobile mercenary army. I think this is what a lot of people are after. I think a lot of people want to do like Viking raiding as a landless character, which is going to be cool. But they didn't want this to be the only way to play it. There are different ways you can play a landless adventure. It isn't all about doing battles. You can go around just helping people build buildings. And we'll see an example of that later on as well. As you can see in this next UI, this is the Adventurer Camp UI, and it allows you to kind of specialize your camp to do different things. So you can become Wanderers, where you just do general tasks around places. Swords for Hire, you can become Mercenaries. Become Scholars, I guess you help with like teaching people and things like that. Become Explorers. There are some of these contracts that are based around moving people around the map and things like that. I guess it's linked into that one. Become Freebooters. You obviously will be able to go raiding. You can also become a criminal and just try stealing things from people. I guess that one's covered under there as well. And then become Legitimists. I wonder if that is where you have this and it's all about trying to become landed and you get bonuses built around those as well, because these do change some of the minor bonuses you get from your camp location. And you can move that camp around, obviously. It isn't stuck to one place. You can travel around with this. Finally, they wanted the adventure to be viable in the short, mid to late term. Perhaps not one you'll pass the entire campaign in, but a short stint of being landless before shooting your shot of reclaiming your lands should be viable with a bit of effort, as should staying a wanderer for multiple generations at a time. So you can start landless. You can play an entire game as landless, or you can start landed, lose your land, and then try build it back. Or any combination of that. You can be in and out of it if you're not very successful, or if you just want to mix it up a little bit. As we've already seen in the previous dev diaries, in the next patch, we are getting the ability to choose from multiple people when you die. It isn't necessarily always going to be your heir. You can choose from a selection of 3 people, and they will have different setups. So even if you could, in theory, stay as a landed character, you can choose to play as somebody from your dynasty who isn't landed, and mix it up every time if you do want to. Landing yourself as an adventurer should be possible, but not something you can click your fingers and do no prep work for. Those unwilling to accept getting in on the lowest conceivable rung of the feudal ladder should have to actually try to climb higher. So you aren't, as a landless character, going to be able to, within like one lifetime, go from landless to being the emperor or something crazy like that. I'm sure somebody will have a video out very soon after launch where they started landless and ended up being the emperor of the HRE or something crazy like that. But the aim is that you have to work very hard to get to the point where somebody's going to give you land. I think that is a good way for this to work. I'm glad it isn't just you can build up some bonuses really quick and then somebody will come in and say, do you want to be a duke of so-and-so? And you can just accept it. Overall, the idea of this system was to create a closer relationship to your location on the map and the incentives to explore it, whilst letting you build resources faster than some landed rulers with sufficient work and the cost of not being able to do so passively. So you are going to be able to, in theory, earn gold quicker than a normal character. It's just going to take more work to do it, and then you've obviously got the additional risk of not being a landed character. You can lose it all. If you have a mercenary band, well, they don't kind of regrow from your lands because you don't have any lands. So if your people die, then they're dead. Got to rebuild it up by hiring more people in and things like that. So it's risk-reward. You can have some cool rewards, but it is a lot of risk as well. And with all that being said, what is the adventuring core loop when you actually sit down to play it? Well, playing as a landless adventurer, the basic gameplay flow is to find yourself a new location, either because you've moved your camp there or because that is just what you want to do as an adventurer, and to look around for work that you can undertake. Work here means contracts. These appear as scrolls on the map, as we've already seen in the previous screenshot. each of which represent a different job. What a job might be is varied, both tonally and mechanically, and they're going to go into some of those in just a minute, as they say. This is Poland in this example. You can see your camp is relatively central in this one, and then they've got like an intrigue contract, a construction one by the looks of it, a diplomacy one, and a stewardship, and you can choose which one of these you want to do. If none of them take your fancy, you can stick around for some different ones, or you can just pick up your camp and move to Pomerania and see what Pomerania has to offer. So that is how they want you to kind of travel around the map as a cool band of adventurers, pick up these contracts, move on to somewhere else, and see where the kind of flow of the game takes you, which is pretty nice. Each contract has a minimum of a pass state and a fail rate, with rewards and penalties that come from both outcomes, though many have various alternate successes and failures depending on whether you get an exceptional result or a below grade one. Generally, they're only going to show us in this, though, the standard reward packages. They do show off some of the exceptional result ones, though, later on. So it isn't just you complete the quest, you don't. You can actually have a span of success or failure that gives you different rewards, which is cool. I think playing this kind of gameplay means you're not wanting to have where it's just yes or no. You have a scale, so it isn't totally lost if you don't do fantastically well. If you complete a contract for your employer, you'll receive gold, prestige, sometimes piety, and the new adventure-specific provisions. That was covered, I think, in the last dev diary as well. That is the kind of food you need to actually keep your camp alive. As with administrative families, adventurers have a domicile. Unlike the grand estates of an admin realm, our humble wanderers only have a camp to call their own. And again, you can see here, this one is in a desert somewhere. It's got different style looking buildings. The actual tapestry looking image is different as well. This is awesome. I kind of thought we'd just get a generic looking one, but it does look like every kind of different terrain is going to get a different looking camp, which is awesome, especially as you're moving around the map. I think it's going to be cool that this changes. Every time you settle your camp somewhere different, it could potentially look different in the UI as well. I think that's really cool to really draw you into the flavor of being this kind of character. The gold you earn from your contracts, this can be spent on building upgrades, gradually instituting new organizations or customs rather than permanent structures. Martially inclined adventurers may also spend it on building and maintaining large armies. So if you do become a mercenary band, that is how you're going to pay for soldiers, and then you get paid from your contracts. So it's kind of a tiered effect of what's happening there. Prestige is needed still to advance your fame, which both governs the tier of rulers who will offer you contracts. Kings and emperors just won't hand them out to everyone, and even dukes may ask for something in return, and unlocks increasingly more powerful versions of ways to become landed. So I guess if you do become that really high level prestige, that is where you could potentially become a duke. I do wonder if you can actually be given a kingdom. I doubt it, but maybe. I've always said it'd be cool in this system if you could go off as a Crusader landless, and then if you do very well, the Pope actually gives you the Crusader Kingdom. I don't know if that is the case. I don't think it's mentioned here at all. That would be a cool way for this to work as well. Provisions are spent to allow you to travel with your camp across the map. While you can move on low or even no provisions, you will suffer dramatic consequences for doing so. I imagine your followers start dying off or leaving you. It's going to be a bad time. You're not going to want to have that happening all the time. When you exhaust the contracts you wish to take in a particular area, you can most easily find new ones by moving your camp a significant distance away to a new de jure kingdom that you haven't visited recently, or just some other location on the map. There you could take new contracts and new rewards, repeat the process as you move around the map. You'll gather new followers from different lands, try to balance your provisions, income versus expenditure, and decide which contracts you think you're capable of taking and when to do them. And again, you can see in the UI here, accept travel plan. This is the provisions it's going to cost you rather than gold if you're landed. And it's just moving around the map, finding these contracts to do, going into new kingdoms, having kings and dukes offering you jobs, things like that. And then obviously, once you get your prestige high enough, that is where you might think about settling down, trying to get some land off somebody. And you can do that through the Patron system, which they're going to cover later on as well. They do expect some players to want to be an adventurer for little time as possible, and others will want to play them for centuries at a time. Off-ramps are provided at various stages for players who decide they want to leave the life of an adventurer and become landed. It's up to you if you're happy taking a backwater county somewhere in exchange for a huge sum of cash, building an army to try retaking your throne, or simply drift around the world, making your mark in a half dozen small ways. So again, you can lose your kingdom through normal gameplay, become unlanded, go off adventure, build up some money, build up a huge army, you know, kind of Revenge of the King, hi, I'm back as like his son or something, and you're going to try retake your kingdom. That would be some awesome gameplay. If you lose like the throne of England, you go off around the continent for a couple of generations, take revenge for my grandfather and reclaim the throne. That's going to be some awesome gameplay, some awesome stories. I think like most players, I play Crusader Kings to build stories as I play it. I find it much more enjoyable than like a min-max map painter kind of game. I think EU4 is more towards that kind of play style. Crusader Kings, I like playing stories. If you ever watch any of my live streams or campaigns, I try and play it as my character. So if they're high in martial, I try to play as a martial character. If they're high in intrigue, I tried doing schemes and things like that. If you lose a kingdom, you can play out a story of getting it back, or maybe just going somewhere else and saying, hey, we got kicked out of England, we're going to go to Sardinia, go adventuring around the Mediterranean, and then ultimately claim that, and that will be our new homeland. Now, we've seen these mentioned a few times during this dev diary, but what is a contract? Fundamentally, they are a vehicle for different types of content that you can opt into as an unlanded adventurer, with rewards that you can generally see in advance. They will alter depending on what happens, though. Different jobs offer different rewards, and higher tier rulers will offer you higher tier contracts with better rewards, and then you get into that cycle of starting with barons and counts, going up to dukes, then kings and above. You're going to get better and better as you progress up those. If you do well, if you do terrible, you're going to be stuck with barons. The jobs themselves range from helping in wars, assisting councillors, educating children, collecting back taxes. They're an abstraction of word of mouth, heralds, spies, and town criers that would have filled this role historically, but were a smidge tricky to represent in the neat, concise visuals, which is why they've gone for sort of faux notice board aesthetic, and that is where you're seeing those contracts on the map. If this looks familiar to the admin dev diaries, well, it should. As we said at the beginning, governor duties are the basic system that this was built on. That is why I think they chose this, because they had the system kind of half built with everything they'd done for the admin government, so they could easily rework it. Well, I'm not going to say easily, but they could rework that into this adventurer system as well. The next screenshot we've got here is actually one of the criminal ones, which is great. So you can actually pick up a contract here to ambush some travelers on the road. We've been on the other side of these kind of events all the time in Crusader Kings. Well, now we're going to be the ones going after other people, and you will get a criminal record from doing this. One thing they are going to call out here, though, very early on, is that as a landed character, so if you're playing as a landed character yourself, the only one that you can hand out is mercenary contracts. That is the only one available. Now, there's many reasons why I think they could have chosen this to be the case. The main reason they call out here is because they are the core gameplay loop of landless characters, which means adventurers are expected to do a lot of contracts. And if they were bilaterally playable, that substantially more than doubles the complexity of just about every conceivable contract. Ultimately, that meant they'd be able to make far fewer of them because they'd have to build each kind of contract from both sides. So how the AI offers it to you, but then as a player, how could you offer that to an AI character that potentially could visit your land? So I can kind of see why they've done this. I wonder also if it's because it could become very exploitable by a player. If you could choose which one of these to do at all times to hand out to people, I think you could exploit it very, very easily. So I wonder if that is also part of the reason why they've done it this way. I think it would have been kind of cool as a landed character to just be like a patron person, as we'll get into later on, and they would just be handing out these contracts to people, having them as like your own band of adventurers in a way, or just ones traveling through your land, offer them a contract, see what they do, and then off they go. I think that would have been kind of cool to play as, but I see why they've done this. It does duplicate the work that needs to be done. It also, I think, takes away some of the uniqueness of playing as a landless character. If you're also handing out these contracts, going through the system from the other side, I think it does diminish the kind of uniqueness of playing as a landless character in this style. So I can see from both ways why. So the nuts and bolts of that is that when a contract appears on the map, they will have an icon roughly showing what kind of job they are, as we've already seen. Opening one not only shows you the potential rewards and penalties, but also who the employer is, a little narrative breakdown of what they want, and a plain speech breakdown of what you actually need to do for the mechanics of the contract. So some flavor on there, but then also exactly what you need to do. This one is hunt criminals for Count Ivan. He wants you to get rid of some criminals. This contract requires you to slay a particular character either via duel, completing a martial skill challenge, or by throwing men-at-arms at them and taking losses. So there's different ways. If you've got a high prowess character, you'll probably do the duel. If you have a high martial skill and not a high prowess, you can do it through a challenge. Or if you're kind of terrible at those, but you just have a large army with you, you can just throw your men at it. That is probably the worst one to do because you can't replenish your troops. You can't reinforce them because you don't have land yourself. You have to replace them in other ways. So you're not going to want to just throw your army at everything. At least not unless you desperately have to. And as you can see, the potential rewards, 136 gold, that seems like a lot of gold. Some of these, as they already called out, haven't gone through full balancing, but as a count, somebody's going to give you 140 gold almost to just kill off some character. It seems like quite a lot, but we'll see, obviously, how it plays out differently in the patch. They will also gain opinion of you. You will get some prestige. You will add Count Ivan to your roll of patrons. They're going to cover that later on. And you gain 500 provisions. So that is going to allow you to carry on your camp life, travel somewhere else with those provisions if you want to. One thing you will quickly notice during gameplay is that different contracts offer different rewards. Some might give you mostly gold or primarily prestige. Others might give you provisions for the road or a mix of the two. Contracts that offer possible critical successes will generally offer substantially extra rewards, either new currencies or more of the main reward after achieving them. though the employer's greed may compel them to offer much, much less than usual too. So there is going to be a wide variety of these rewards depending on what kind of contract it is, what level it is, who's giving them. I'm presuming if they're like a greedy character, they won't give you as much gold. If they're more kind of free with their money, you might get more gold than usual. This is to help encourage you to shop around for different contracts at different areas. Maybe you land in a kingdom full of tight-fisted gits, handing out paltry sums for substantial work, and then decide to move on rather than waste your time, even if it means stretching your provisions a little tighter. Maybe a contract that you usually wouldn't take or might not be very good at happens to be offering a very good reward and is worth the risk in taking. So again, this is a fantastic idea. It isn't just a standard reward based on the tier, which is 3 tiers high. If they're a king, a duke or something, it is going to be varied depending on the traits of the character handing them out. So as they say here, maybe you're in Brittany or somewhere. The duke there is very generous. He's always giving you loads of gold and stuff, but then he dies. Maybe his son is a little bit more tight-fisted. Well, I'm just going to move somewhere else because I can earn more money doing the same work or even easier work if I go somewhere else where, again, there's another generous ruler or something like that. So I think this is organically going to make you move around the map, trying to hunt out these better contracts that either fit your gameplay or give you good rewards based on who's handing them out to you. And as we can see in this next screenshot, this is a settled boundary dispute contract with some different requirements to the previous one. This requires you to travel to the Baron's holding and complete a challenge. You are guaranteed to be able to test your stewardship, but other options may depend on what the issue is, what your camp purpose is, your followers, and your officers. So for some of these, there are the main way to finish it, or the way that's more predefined as to what it's going to be. But then depending on a bunch of other things, you can actually get different ways to finish it, which is great. And then in this one, instead of the potential rewards, it is the potential failure. So you will lose prestige and the person is also going to like you less. So not a horrendous reward failure, but this is just for a count. This is a low level thing anyway. So I guess the failure punishment isn't that bad. I guess the reward's probably not that good from this one either, as it is such a low level one. I wonder if there's larger ones for bigger projects where you actually can get like banished from the land or something like that. If you can maybe like take money to build a castle and then you just run off with the gold. I wonder if you get like kicked out, and then if you're spotted, they're going to come after you and try to get that money back. That would be cool as well. And as we've seen already, the parameters of a bunch of these contracts are varied. Some require no travel, some require you to travel the length of the map, while others may involve a small tour of a character's realm. Some are made up of small linked event chains. Others have their own custom micro decisions, which they're going to show off later on. The more common a contract is likely to be, the more they focused on trying to make it replayable. So these different ways you can finish it. As you've already seen, these different ways you might be able to progress through it. So then the same contract is mechanically and aesthetically a little bit different each time you pick it up, even if you are performing the same thing twice in quick succession. So hopefully this isn't going to be like traveling events where you see the same one every time. You know the answer to pick. Even if you're role-playing, there isn't really that many options to choose. We've all seen the knight stuck in his armor and things like that. Whereas this way, it could potentially be the same contract, but you can complete it different ways depending on your setup of your camp, what your character's doing, maybe like how much gold and things like that you've got as well. Finding these contracts is easy and automatic. Contracts are discovered when you move close enough to them or move to a new de jure kingdom that you have not been to recently. Occasionally, new contracts will also appear in place over time, and when you're traveling, notable contracts may spring up along the route to encourage you to make pit stops. So with this, there's going to be always a variety of things. You can stay where you are, use up all the contracts. I guess you can kind of wait it out and hope some good ones appear. Or if you've built up the provisions, you can go on an adventure, try find something in another area of the map. Or as they say here, even if you're just traveling along the map for no other reason, just to kind of explore a little bit, you are going to see these pop up as well. So there's going to be a bunch of these all the time around you by the looks of it. Exactly what type of contracts you're likely to find is controlled by your camp purpose, teased in the earlier image, but this is something they're going to talk about more next week. So as we've already seen, I think there was 6 different purposes you could choose, and it looks like it is going to slightly theme the events and the contracts you pick up. I guess if you choose the mercenary one, I suppose it's like people hearing you're a mercenary band, so you get more mercenary contracts, I guess, along the route of doing that. I think that's kind of a good way for it to work. It would be cool if you had like the progression bars like you get for hunting and things for all 6 types. And then the more you did one of them, the more renown you got of that kind of content. So the more you did mercenary work, the more you got well known for it. You got offered more mercenary contracts. Maybe if you sat down and did the education one, you become well known as a scholar, so you get more along those lines. I think that would be a cool way for it to work. They have already said it doesn't totally lock out the other ones. You just see more of the same one depending on which one you've chosen. So you can get ones out of left field that aren't what you usually pick up, but you'll probably be not very good at them, but they might be worth the risk at times as well. And then, as I said at the beginning of the video, the base contract mechanic is free for modders to implement regardless of DLC ownership. So you're going to see like Game of Thrones, all these other kind of mods use this, and you won't need to have the DLC to kind of access the functionality of it. Obviously, they won't just bring the exact copy of this into one of those mods, but think of like Game of Thrones, like Traveling Hedge Knights, things like that. They're going to be able to use this system to build their content on that. But then, as I was saying, if you're playing the game itself without the Roads to Power DLC, you won't have access to any of this system at all. You will only be able to see adventurers on the map. You won't be able to be an adventurer yourself, and you won't be able to like interact with it in any way by the sounds of it either. So a little bit disappointing, but I think that is pretty much the only way they could do it without watering it down too much. I did think maybe they could have like locked it in a certain way where you could become a landless adventurer, but you could only be like a raider, you could only be a mercenary band, and then all the other content would be locked behind the paywall. But with how they've implemented it and how far they've gone into changing how it works, I don't think that would work. I think it would make so many events really weird because you'd have to have that specific military focus or something to be successful. I can see why they've split it this way. It is unfortunate because it goes a little bit against what they were talking about previously about wanting all features in the base game. I guess it technically is in the base game still. Technically, they are still keeping to that, but to access it, you do need to pay. I will say with the amount of changes they've done here, I'm not too mad about that. I think this is way more than even I thought they'd do with this system. I thought it'd be just events, as I was saying earlier. They've put a lot of work into this, a lot of different systems being reworked. As I said, there's more being reworked that we haven't even got to yet in this dev diary, so I don't mind paying for this. It is a large bit of content, so I'm okay with it. Now, in the next section, they go over example contracts. This is pretty much a story of a character going through all the different kinds of contracts, kind of telling out their life in a little bit of a story here. I'm not going to go through it in this video. This video is going to be huge enough as it is already. This will just bloat it out even further. But as I said earlier, I will leave a link to this in the description down below. I would recommend going to read this once you've watched the whole video, obviously. Don't do it now. Watch the whole video and then go and read this, obviously. But it does really show you how you would play through an adventure as a character. So it's all about them building a castle and then going on adventure, being a bodyguard for somebody on a route, how the new scheme system interacts with this. Now, they don't go into much detail. They do say in a future dev diary before launch, we are going to get more information about the new scheme system. I can now see why they've redone it because it fits into these contracts. The different kind of people that we saw in the previous dev diary about it, where it was like loosely mentioned, they much better fit into this contract system for adventurers because these different roles are going to be different people in your camp and things like that. They also do say they wanted to get it away from being just intrigue focused. So as you will see, if you do read through these example ones, one of them is building a castle. So that is more a stewardship focused scheme, and it's all about building a castle, how well you do it, and things like that. So this scheme system is getting a rework to not be solely about intrigue. Intrigue's not always going to be the best way to complete them. I do wonder if they'll rename it. I guess they won't. They'll probably keep the scheme name, but I almost think like projects would be a better way for it to be worded if you are playing as a landless character, because most of the time it isn't going to be scheming to kill someone, befriend them, all those kind of ones that we have already. Some of these are just going to be like build a castle and then filling it out with engineers and things like that. That is why that system's getting reworked. But as I said, they are going to cover that in more detail in a future dev diary, so we won't linger on it too much during this section. And then in that section, they do show off as well the different types. So there is the scheme one that we were just talking about. There is also then event-based contracts. They play out much more like events do currently. They're not using the scheme system at all. Another type of contract they've already mentioned as well is a travel contract. This is where you're traveling somewhere, or maybe you're being a bodyguard for somebody else who's trying to explore their realm. Maybe they're off to Crusades or something like that, and they ask for a bodyguard, and then you've got to escort them across the map. We all love escort quests in games. Well, they're coming to Crusader Kings, so strap in. It's going to be fun. There are a bunch of different ones. There's also counselor contracts. These are where you're helping counselors of realms do certain tasks for them as well. So as you can already see, these are themed around different areas of the game. There's the scheme system, there's the travel system, there's obviously the warfare system that it is part of as well. And it looks like they're all kind of loosely themed into these buckets of different parts of the game. Mercenary contracts being the last one they show off in that section, where a chieftain comes to you, says, can you help me in this war? I'm doing very badly. I'm currently losing by 82%. Can you come and help me win this war? I will give you gold, piety. I will become your patron. You also get a weak hook on the person as well in this example. And then you join the war. You have to obviously win the war. If you lose, I guess you just lose everything because obviously the dude won't be in power anymore. So it's going to be a bad time. But if you win, you get all these rewards, you get him as a patron, and then he's going to like you more and more in the future as well. And during this war, you have to obviously win fights, you have to siege places down, You also have to make sure none of his lands siege, so it's kind of an all-round warfare kind of contract. I think these look pretty cool. I imagine most of you are going to play this and just be a wandering band of mercenaries helping out different counts, dukes, and kings with their wars, especially wars that are going very badly. I wonder if they give you more money than if the war's going okay and they just want you to kind of finish off the war a little bit. If it's going very badly, I wonder if you can like twist the knife a little bit and say, okay, but you're giving me more if we're victorious. So it does show off all those different types. As I said, do take time to read through it after you've watched the video, because it does kind of show you all the different steps of how this works. But as I said, I didn't want to cover it all in this video because this is going to be an hour long at least already. But with all that being said, we've been shown the general system of how these contracts work, and they've already mentioned these previously, but what are Patron supporters? I think I called them Patreon supporters earlier. I'm going to accidentally mix those two up because both are kind of in my head at the same time. But anyway, let's get into what they are. So once you've finished a contract, you're a bit more well known to them than just some random wanderer. Most successfully completed contracts will allow you to add the employer to your role of patrons, although some, especially basic or simple contracts, may require an exceptional success to add them as a patron. Patrons, simply put, are people you can mooch off. By burning opinion with them, you can extract favors, obtain unnegotiated rewards, or even garner something as exotic as a marriage or troops. The more you try and take, the more annoyed they'll get with you, and the less you'll be able to rely on them for work in the future. So this is going to be a cool circle of life, really. You're going to go into a kingdom, complete contracts, maybe get them as a patron, keep doing jobs for them, they're going to like you even more. Maybe you can then get a marriage out of them, or some troops, or maybe even some special rewards. I wonder if there's artifacts and things you can pick up, but then you need to cash in your opinion for those. And then if you go too far, they won't like you, and then you won't get future work. Now, it would be cool to build up as much opinion as you can and then dump it into a bunch of things and then just leave town. That would be pretty cool to do, I think. Kind of get as much out of them as you can and then just run off and be like, okay, I'm off somewhere else now. Thanks very much. I guess they won't mind too much even if you do that because you did complete the jobs for them. The whole point is to then spend that opinion, but I think it's kind of funny to just build everything up and then just leave town with all the rewards right at the end. Outside of random lands that you find yourself in, though, you can actually lobby your friends and family in-game for the same favors, even if you've done no work for them. So that familial bond, I guess, allows you to just say, hey, can I have some provisions? Can I have some troops, maybe? Maybe you're planning a larger mercenary kind of era for your band. Maybe you swing by your brother's kingdom, pick up some troops, and then go off adventuring again. I wonder what they ask for in return. Maybe they get like a hook on you and they can call you into their wars or something. That would be pretty cool if it worked that way. And all this is, of course, if they like you. If they don't like you, they ain't going to help you out at all anyway. And as you can see here in this next UI, this is the role of patrons. And in this, they've got a local patron, a chieftain, and then 3 distant patrons. So obviously, as these characters travel around the map, they've picked these up, but then moved on anyway as other things have happened. As you can see, they all dislike him, so they won't actually give him any rewards anyway by the looks of it. But that is how you will see this list of characters. They're not like owe you favors, but that are willing to like help you out because you've helped them previously. As adventurers don't have a fixed abode, we assume you will move around the map at least a little bit. They don't think you're going to just stay in the exact same place. Even if you stay in something like the HRE, you're still going to move around the map just because you're going to use up your contracts in the north of Germany and then move down to the bottom and then work your way around the empire a bit if for whatever reason you just don't want to leave the HRE at all. Next, we're going to talk about a different kind of contract you can pick up. I mentioned this at the start. Not all of these contracts are good, if you want to think of it that way. You can turn to a life of crime. Not every jobbing adventurer is a roving scholar out to teach children of the world or engage exclusively in honorable mercenary work. Some of them, shockingly, have been known to lie, cheat, swindle, steal, kidnap, and kill. Enter the criminal contract. And as you can see, it has a slightly different UI, this, to really call out that they are different to normal contracts, because these are going to build up a reputation in a bad way for you, so you don't want to accidentally pick these up. They are all visually highlighted in red and mud to mark them differently visually, and they will tend to offer greater rewards for even mediocre successes. So yes, you can pick these up. They will look kind of enticing to do, but it is going to be a bad time if you pick them up and get caught doing them. Criminal contracts can be performed on behalf of the employer, say kidnapping a rival, or even targeting the employer themselves. For instance, preying on travelers of someone foolish enough to advertise weakened wilderness patrols in their domain. And the example we see here is ambush travelers. It's kind of funny how this one is shown, because this is the count here, and you think it's him hiring you, saying, look, there's robbers and bandits around in my lands, quick, come and help me. But this is actually the reverse of that. This is you hearing that and thinking, oh great, I'm going to go steal stuff as well from there. So this contract requires you to travel to this holding, waylaying characters to take their gold. You can do this through prowess, martial, or intrigue challenges. So again, you don't have to be martial focused specifically. It's probably going to help you a lot. if you are intrigue focused though, you can be a little sneaky thief and steal stuff from people. And then the potential rewards, again, this is cool. It isn't a set amount. It varies entirely on who you meet on the road. You can get some wealthy dukes, some pilgrimaging players who won't have as much gold, a whole wide range, and obviously depending on how many you meet of each kind, that's going to equal how much gold you get out of this. And you also gain a new trait, Gallows Bait. That is going to be talked about in a second. There are some new traits. And you also gain 10 experience as a bandit, which is part of those traits as well. And what is the drawback of this? As we've seen, the rewards could be very good. Well, they are crimes. And unless you're performing a crime on behalf of an employer, you'll lose opinion with that person rather than adding them to your role of patron. So if you are raiding in the Count's land above, he's obviously not going to like you. If you've been on the other side and helped him stop it, he would have liked you and maybe become a patron of yours. Depending on the exact crime you do, you may even lose prestige for succeeding due to its lowered reputation. A violated employer will also receive a criminal opinion of you, making them able to imprison you if they ever get the chance, and much more likely to try evict you from their realm. An interaction they'll be covering more next week. So it does look like, as we thought earlier, you can actually be evicted from a realm and said, like, you can't come in here anymore. You're a bad person. Get out. Don't ever come back. And then I guess you wait for him to die, and then you can get round to it. It would be cool then if you could go, as we were talking about earlier, to your brother who's a king or something and say, hey, this guy over here, he's kind of kicked me out of his lands. Could you try kill him for me? And then when he's dead, you could then go back into those lands again. That would be a pretty cool interaction. I don't think that is going to be something in the game, but maybe a mod or something could do that. And as you can see here, burn property. This is the next kind of criminal one. Generous pay offered for urgent ground clearance. Confidentiality is necessary. Applicants are directed to the province count's castle. So it's kind of funny. He is actually putting up a banner saying like, hey, can you come burn something down, please, for me? But please be quiet about it at the same time. This contract requires you to travel to a location and commit arson via an intrigue challenge. Martial prowess and your officers may be used instead. Again, this is linking into what they were saying earlier about the same events will appear, but you can complete them in different ways. And that's going to allow you to get more replayability out of this. Again, this is a criminal contract. It's going to give you some bad outcomes as well. But if you are successful, you get 126 gold. He gets 30 opinion of you. You gain 500 provisions. He's added to your roll of patrons. You get a weak hook on him. You gain that trade again, and you gain the bandit trade experience again. They're going to cover that in a second, but that is the rewards for doing this. Potential failures, I guess he just really doesn't like you if that is the case. The real short-term consequences of undertaking a criminal contract is the gallows bait trait, which measures how much the world at large considers you to be an upstart petty thug. So this is one of these fame traits that isn't good the higher it gets. It's actually worse the higher it gets. It does have some different bonuses. It isn't all bad for you, but it's kind of a reverse trait where it's not generally seen as a good thing to have this for the most part. And as you can see here, this is the trade itself. So you actually get plus 30 opinion of other characters that are the same, which is cool. That probably allows you to recruit them into your camp a little bit easier. And you can see there are 5 different traits. There is bandit, trickster, thief, poacher, and marauder. Now, one thing they didn't call out here at all is if you could be a full-time adventuring raider. That isn't mentioned at all. But I think this does show that might be possible, because I think marauder is probably something like that. Maybe not full raiding, but I guess maybe you get somebody saying like, hey, can you go raid this territory and then come back, and you'll pick up marauder trait experience for doing that. I think it must either be you're fully able to just raid however much you want, or you get these raiding contracts and that's what it's themed around. I think you must be able to do some kind of raiding, because I think that one matches it too well to not be the case. But as we can see, there are those 5 different ones. They're going to give you different negative rewards. They do give you some positive as well. You can see here trickster. That actually gives you plus 5 courtier and guest opinion, and then everything else is kind of bad for you. When a landed noble or even a fancy courtier or baron's guest commits a murder, it's a rather exciting scandal for the history books. When an adventurer loots a caravan in the woods, they're just a petty bandit deserving no more attention than a noose around their neck. I mean, that is true, you know. If a landed noble goes and kills someone, oh, it's a bit of a story, but if you're an adventurer, you're just a bad person. I think it's that Scarlet Witch meme they could have put in here. Of course, some non-criminal contracts will also offer the chance to conduct yourself unlawfully, particularly if you generally fancy yourself something of a bandit. So there are going to be ones that kind of mix this up a little bit as well, like lawful contracts in a way, but there are going to be like bad ways to unlawfully finish them, which will give you some of this experience as well. You won't have to do these. And with all that, if you do go around finishing all these criminal contracts, being a bad person, well, what if you want to settle down and become respectable? Well, there is a way to do that. There is a way to wipe the slate and say, I've changed. Many a petty bandit, lying swindler, and deadly marauder have managed to make the jump to respectable landed ruler throughout the centuries, and they've generally got one thing in common. They know how to use their new gains to cover up their old crimes. Should you tire of the world's disdain, either as an adventurer or a newly minted lord, you'll possibly want to lose those general opinion debuffs and wipe the slate clean. The world can be convinced to forget for a price, of course. And here we go. Clear stain of banditry, rehabilitate your word, let old habits die, cast in noble light, suppress tales of brutality, or make bygones be bygones. As you can see, the top 5 match the 5 different traits. So I guess they just zero out those traits as if you've never done them. Make bygones be bygones. I'm not sure about that one. That looks like maybe wipes all of them. So you don't want to have any of them stay around. You could just do all 5 in one interaction by the looks of it. And you'll be able to do that even as a lord, it says. So I guess once you've landed yourself, if you do have this bad history, you could clear that so your new vassals don't hate you quite as much. And then as we've seen during the whole dev diary here, you do have to travel around the map to do these contracts. And with that, they have reworked slightly how the travel system works for these characters. It doesn't work the exact same way. As we've already seen, it uses provisions and not just gold as it does at the moment. This will limit how far you can actually travel at one time. So you might not be able to travel the entire length of the map in one go, especially early on in the game when you haven't built up your resources and your camp and things like that. Since you don't have any land of your own, you don't have a steady source of income or way of obtaining food. When you're out camping in a province, that isn't too much of a big deal. Your followers can forage, do odd jobs, or at least avoid calorie-intensive activities, so your provisions won't go down, so they don't trickle down if you're just kind of stood in the same place, as it were. They did experiment with the idea of having this ticking down gradually over time, but they did find that it was too easy to become stuck in a death spiral, where you didn't have enough provisions to move anywhere, but you couldn't earn enough provisions to kind of do anything, so you kind of got stuck in the same place, and in the end, your men would all die from starvation and bad things would happen. Or you just have these kind of silly situations happening. So that is why it doesn't trickle down like month to month. It is only when you do things that cost provisions that it actually goes down. I'm sure it could have worked in some way where you would get that gradual reduction, but I do think you would, as they say, get stuck in these weird interactions where you don't have enough provisions to do something and you end up kind of stuck in the same place waiting for contracts that give you provisions. So yeah, you can kind of plan for the future, build up stockpiles, and then move on in the future. So I do like the way this is set up. I'm sure somebody will make a mod where it does trickle down gradually, but I can see why they have chosen this. When you're on the road, however, you have far less time to go scavenging, and you will have to use whatever supplies you have in reserve. Provisions represent the sum total of your traveling rations, whatever water you're carrying if it wouldn't be easily obtainable elsewhere, and even odds and ends like spare fabric, tools, and things for repairing your tent. So it's kind of an amalgamation of everything you would kind of need in a camp environment, kind of boiled down into just provisions as a name. We could have had this split out, I guess, but I think that just overcomplicates it for no real reason. So I can see why they've kind of combined it all into this one mechanic, as it were. As an adventurer's camp moves from one barony to another, they expend provisions with every province they travel. The cost is determined by the terrain plus the men-at-arms you have. Every men-at-arms regiment now has a provision cost shown for adventurers. So I guess they now just cost provisions, or I guess they must cost gold as well. You must pay your men-at-arms as well outside of provisions, so maybe it shows both of them in the UI. Light infantry tend to be cheap to feed, though their numbers may add up over time, whilst elephantry are positively hellish consumers of provisions, and elaborate heavy cavalry may come not only with their beasts, but their support personnel who need fooding and feeding as well. Large armies will need to make many pit stops to resupply, whereas smaller camps of followers can afford to go further on less. So yes, once you build up these larger mercenary armies, you are going to kind of get stuck in the same location unless you can really chain together a lot of rewards for provisions. You are going to burn through these pretty quickly if you're trying to move your whole army, which again makes sense historically. That was kind of the limiting factor at the time for moving armies around. Your maximum number of provisions is a cap determined by the buildings in your camp. When you start to fall below a certain number, you'll start suffering events. These involve your followers losing faith, some leaving you or substantially reducing their opinion. Eventually, you and your followers will risk low health, permanent negative traits, or even death from starvation. And you can see here the baggage train, again, some really cool graphics here. And this gives you officers for scouting for talent, unlocks head porter officer, receives more transport contracts. So having this actually unlocks transport contracts a little bit more often, and they're ones where you're taking people around the map. It does make sense they kind of work together. Provisions capacity plus 40%, supply capacity as well, it improves, travel speed, and then max size of regiments also increases that, which makes sense. You've got more space for food, you can have larger armies, and that allows you to do that, get into that cycle of victory or cycle of death if you're not very good at doing it. The closer you are to zero provisions, the worse the privation events are going to be. Never travel without provisions if you can help it. And as you can see here, do I see the light? This is someone who's probably going to die because they've run out of provisions. You can see here you gain 100 stress anyway, And then the possible outcomes, 12% you're going to starve to death. And then you can see all the other different illnesses you could potentially pick up, or even your body is permanently stunted. So I wonder if you can't get stats or any more prowess or something like that if that is the one that it rolls onto. Overall, as I say though, you don't want to be doing this if possible. With all of this, if you have the ability to travel somewhere, you can do so. You can travel to any barony on the map. The only limit is the size of your men-at-arms and the number of provisions you have stocked. Unless you've been exiled from a certain realm, of course, that is covered in next week's Dev Diary, so you can be banished and then you can't go into that realm, I guess, until the king or queen or somebody dies. The easiest way to gain provisions is through contracts, and they can be obtained via hunt activities, a dedicated decision for foraging, events, and a new visit settlement decision, which they're going to cover next week as well. So giving us some spoilers as to what's coming next week. And as you can see from this event, this is going out foraging the lands, trying to pick up some provisions from around you. I guess if you don't have permission, maybe this is where you can get some negative opinion of you as well. Of course, not every time an adventurer travels requires them to take their whole camp with you, so they don't always expend provisions when they move. Only if their domicile is being moved around the map. You're explicitly told when this will happen, so you know it is going to take from your reserves. So yeah, doing just general contracts isn't going to do this. It's more if you're moving your camp around the map, or if you pick up one of these contracts that is, you know, move across the map or something, escort somebody across the map, and maybe escort them to the Holy Lands or something. They are obviously going to be ones where you take your camp with you, and it is going to affect you. On top of that, good examples of travel that won't generally cost you provisions are things like going to feasts or tournaments, going on a pilgrimage, which is kind of funny. I would have thought you'd take your camp with you, but I guess you're kind of just going on your own. Contracts that involve travel generally give you an option if you want to take your camp or not. I guess it does help you in some ways. So if you're touring some realms' land to collect taxes, you don't need to pay as you go unless you choose to. They opted to take this route with provisions rather than just using the army supply mode because they didn't want it to kind of interact with each other that way. They wanted to have it separated out and have it so it actually plays differently. As they say here, if they had to balance army supply for adventurers and normal armies, it would just get really confusing. They'd have to have so many special rules for each side. I think having provisions like this is a much better solution for this. I think it works a lot better. They could keep them separately, easier to balance. And I think it also just makes it feel a little bit different. If you played as one of these adventurers and it just used the supply mode, I think that wouldn't feel as good, whereas having these provisions is almost like a mini game within it anyway, trying to balance that provision system. And with all of that so far in the Dev Diary, I will say we're only about 2/3 through this Dev Diary. I did say it was a huge one with a lot of information, but that is the general kind of gameplay loop, as they mentioned at the beginning, how you can pick up the contracts, how you finish them, how your camp in a way works, what the rewards are, how you can progress through it, all those kind of things. Next, they're going to talk about the camp itself. This has been kind of mentioned here or there already a few times, even in this Dev Diary. And much like administrative realms, adventurers have a domicile. Unlike admin, who have majestic, sprawling estates, adventurers only have a humble camp to call their own. And again, this is another version of the UI here. Well, not really another version, but another flavor of it. We've seen a desert one, a forest one, and then this is a tribal camp in the snow with a mysterious guest, it says. We'll find out more about that maybe in a second. These camps have fewer building slots than estates, but provide a partial refund for their construction costs on destruction, including if you become landed. This gives you a bit more freedom to try different configurations of buildings and upgrades, changing them out over time and retooling your camp according to the current purpose or adapting to a changing world. So as you progress through, you're not always going to be a mercenary adventurer. Maybe you do want to kind of settle down and become one of these scholar teachers, then you would change how your camp is constructed to give you bonuses around those features instead. Next, they're going to show off some of these buildings. So you can see herbalists here and mobile brewers. So the first one unlocks the chief forager officer. I guess they're going to help you get provisions that little bit easier. Murder schemes begin with a free poisoner agent slot. So building into that scheme's rework. Gain plus 50% provisions when foraging with the gather provisions decision. And income as well, 0.1 gold. I think the gold really isn't going to affect much. It is really going to be those contracts that give you a lot of your gold. Mobile brewers, that also gives you the same officer unlock. It unlocks extra options for the camp revelry activity. Courtier's opinion plus 10, more income and more plague resistance as well. So building into the plague system with some of these buildings as well. Also, like estates, camp buildings can have many internal upgrades, though these do not branch and can be applied in any combination. So if you remember back to the admin government dev diary, you can have almost these talent trees for some buildings where you specialize them in certain ways. In here, it doesn't work the same way. You just have these upgrades that you can choose. Some of these are locked to your camp purpose, meaning that adventurers don't have access to all the upgrades at the same time. I think that does make sense. It allows you to specialize these and not just crazy crazy stat stack, picking up everything at once. Specializing in this way or that should pay dividends as upgrades, both internal and not, have various powerful benefits, and many of these unlock new types of officers, as we've already seen. The next one we're going to see is Reference Corpus. This is a disease-themed one, so you get a small boost to resistance. You get a learning scheme phase length. This makes schemes progress faster. Again, we'll see more about that in the scheme dev diary itself once we get that. Monthly learning lifestyle experience plus 25, monthly learning lifestyle experience plus 25% as well, so really helping you in that area of the game. Mortician's Tools, gain gold from your battle victories and any battles that end in the county of your camp. Natural Dread plus 30, Plague Danger plus 10, and Plague Resistance minus 10, because you're bringing dead bodies to your camp. That is, good in some ways, bad in other ways. In the next section, they're going to talk about camp temperament. Yes, guys, you haven't escaped having people needing to like you at all. Some of that vassal gameplay is coming back in some way. This is a simple measure of how many of your followers, the equivalent of courtiers, actually like you. If the majority like you, you get bonuses. If the majority dislike you, you get penalties. And if there's no majority, you get nothing. So you do have to play this balancing game of having people that generally like you being in your camp. I think that does make sense as well. The bonuses and penalties here scale according to your prestige level, so less notable adventurers have a bit more slack to ignore this, while more famous ones will have to manage their camp much more carefully. That does work into, I think, the more famous you are, the easier it is to get people to join your camp. It is going to be very hard at the beginning to have that many people, so if everyone hated you, it would be a bad time. So it is good they've built in this little bit of flexibility for your character early on in this system. Of course, you can ask any follower you dislike to leave your camp, but their friends and family who are likely traveling with you too will likely take offense and may leave also. Removing followers is certainly doable, but something you'll want to take a much more general approach to, rather than just exiling anyone who disagrees with you. You're not a feudal ruler, and people won't treat you like you are one. A happy camp makes schemes better and easier to fight, so with these 3 supporters, you're getting 0.8% contract scheme growth. I guess that's a modifier. Army toughness plus 10% though. With the detractors here, this makes your schemes last longer, which is bad. And your army damage is minus 20%. That seems pretty bad, but I suppose it does make sense. If they're fighting and they don't like you, I guess, they're not going to fight as good as if they did like you and wanted you to succeed, maybe. So I guess that does kind of make sense. But there we go. That is that system as well. Again, this other system has been brought in to really flesh out the adventurous system as a whole. And with all of that being said, that is the general gameplay for Unlanded Adventurers. They do again call out here that next week we're going to get more information about further little parts of this system. So this isn't everything, but this is the main parts of this new gameplay style. For the rest of this dev diary, they're actually going to go through a few of the other changes on content that we have now that is adapting to work in this system as well. The first thing, and I called this out so long ago at the beginning of this video, is the lifestyle system. Most areas of this are getting a slight rework of some kind if you play as Unlanded. The first one we see here is in Diplomat, and you can see with the helmet icon, these are the additional unlocks if you play as Unlanded. So this will now enable the elope scheme with non-lovers, and also the elope scheme chance is plus 50%. Only get these if you are playing Unlanded. The next one is in Theologian. This one improves the steadfast camp temperament. This will provide a plus 5 health hostility advantage bonus as well. On top of this, there are also some brand new options that actually replace current ones in their entirety if you are Unlanded. So this is Loot and Plunder. Finishing a siege unlocks 20 times the holding's loot value as provisions. Obviously, that wouldn't make sense if you're playing a landed character, but it gets replaced with this, and that does make a lot of sense. You are going to be wanting to finish sieges to get all those provisions. Under Torturer, Crime Pays is a new one. Criminal contracts award 100% more gold. Again, doesn't make sense as a landed character, so it does replace whatever is there usually. And then on top of that, there are some lifestyles that have just been modified slightly. So That Which Binds Us under Administrator now enables the Encourage Relationships travel option. So I guess as you're traveling around the map using the travel system, maybe if you're going across the map for some adventures, you can pick this up, and I guess you make friends with your camp followers. Try build up a bit of a friendship between everyone in the camp. Make sure they like you more, and then that's going to unlock those bonuses that they were talking about earlier. And then again, under Theologian, Wandering Missionary. Now that gives the bonus that you currently already get, but then the additional one is enables the Attempt to Convert interaction with anyone whose domain your camp is located in. So that is a cool new interaction you get. And then gain prestige when successfully using the Attempt to Convert interaction as well. So a way you could travel around the map and try converting people wherever your camp is. I guess there's going to be some kind of gameplay that makes that useful. It will be kind of fun to do anyway, kind of break out heresy somewhere and then just run away and see what happens. It would be pretty funny to do. The next one they're going to show is under Scholar. Take the custom where it comes. Men-at-Arms recruitment cost minus 25% gold. The Wanderer travel trade experience plus 100%. And then may recruit cultural men-at-arms from where you are located. So you can travel your camp around the map and pick up the special cultural men-at-arms from different places and make like a crazy amalgamation of different ones. So you can have like camels, elephants, Varangian adventurers, all these different men-at-arms together in one kind of hodgepodge army and pick up all those crazy different bonuses. This is going to make for some crazy campaigns where you can travel around the map doing contracts, pick up all these different cultural men-at-arms, and then you settle down, be a duke or something, and then I presume you keep these cultural men-at-arms. I guess you don't lose them once you settle, and then you'd be this weird duchy that has all these different men-at-arms collected from around the world, and I guess your army would be so overpowered, it'd be awesome. So I'm sure some of you will definitely try that out. Next, they're going to talk about a bunch of changes that they've called the familiar. First, starting with renames. As an adventurer, you'll notice a few things have been renamed for immersion. So as we've already seen, courtiers are called followers. Your court positions are called camp officers. Just minor changes there, just so the names kind of match, and they're going to cover more of that in next week's Dev Diary. Activities are also a little bit different as well. As an adventurer, you can't host grand activities of any kind, nor can they host proper feasts. You can hunt, though if you don't have the permission of the local ruler, you will be seen as a poacher. Hunting will award provisions regardless. Pilgrimages and university visits for owners of wards and wardens are accessible as normal, so those aren't locked off. I think that makes sense. Even Unlanded, you might go to a university or go on pilgrimage or something. I think it's cool that they are still available. There are, however, no restrictions on inviting adventurers to do things, so they turn up as your guests anywhere they've been invited. Some of the new adventurer lifestyle perk variants allow you to request feasts, even tournaments from other characters for you to attend. So yeah, some of these changes that we've seen above and ones that we haven't seen actually allow you to go to rulers and say, can you put on a feast? Can you put on a tournament? And I'll attend. Replacing the grandiose affair for even the most humble noble feast, adventurers instead receive the new camp revelry micro activity, having fun and getting drunk under the stars. Here they can relieve stress and gain opinion with their followers, which as we've seen is very important for your camp temperament and the bonuses that it provides. So as you can see here, host camp revelry, hold a small celebration in your camp, funded by gold but modified by your provisions. Invitees will include everyone from your camp and optionally local rulers. So I guess they kind of see that you're putting on a party and say like, hey, can I come down to your camp, have a bit of a party as well? Like, I guess that kind of makes sense. Camp parties provide an opportunity to befriend your followers, gain special contracts, and manage stress. So top of the benefits they've already talked about, you can get special contracts through this as well. I wonder if you bring a ruler in, maybe he'll give you a contract he wouldn't usually give you. And then the anticipated rewards, as they've just said, are a bunch of different things. You can even get some artifacts from it, which is pretty cool. Again, I wonder if like a knight comes along and you can like kill him off in the corner and steal his sword or something. That would be pretty fun. Next, they're going to talk about just miscellaneous changes that don't really fit into anything previously. A small but noticeable facet of adventuring is that you cannot demand conversion of your followers unless you've built a specific court building upgrade, the portable shrine. Adventurers lack the compelling force to be able to change somebody's religion. They don't see you as like a duke or something. They just think like, well, you're the leader, but you're not that important. I'm not going to change my faith unless I really, really want to. And here they're going to show off another example as well. So the first one, as they've just said, portable shrine allows you to demand conversion, gives you piety and same faith opinion. Loyal scribes, learning contract rewards plus 50%. That's pretty good. Learning per level of fame plus 1. As you can see though, quite expensive, but as they said at the beginning, so long ago in this video, they are going to do another pass of all these figures before launch. Less noticeable, but no less important, was the work done by the two designers to update old content for both adventurers and admin characters. This has meant that they've gone through over 900 events, 200 decisions, and more than 160 character interactions to update their mechanics and localization to work for landless play. So it's not just the things that have been called out already and what they're going to cover next week. Pretty much every event and decision and character interaction has been changed in some way to allow the system to hook into it and give you rewards that are based on this system. Now, not everything will. Not every one of these 900 events is going to give you something specific to this system. A lot of them are still probably just going to give you opinion modifiers, things like that, but they do help you anyway. But it is reworking those systems. So again, maybe in the future, we can get some additional things as well. And he does call out here, good luck and good mental health to whoever makes a total conversion mod that uses this system. Again, Game of Thrones, guys, I wish you luck. I'm sure it's going to be amazing once it comes out. Next, and kind of finally in this coverage, is the future. As they talked about at the beginning of the Dev Diary, adventurers don't really experience succession politics in the same way as even the smallest realms do. There are no laws binding them save their own will, and comparatively little to be divided or fought over anyway. Even a successful mercenary company is only 1 or 2 bad wars away from being in complete ruin. As we've already seen, you can have these big armies in your mercenary company, but if you lose a battle, those men don't instantly kind of come back to you. You do need to find additional troops from places, so you can quickly lose your way and have to move into something else, or just spend the time rebuilding your mercenary company. Instead of access to electives, partition, or complex single heir preferences, camps are locked into a single succession type. The title will be inherited by your oldest child or next closest relative, providing they are your follower. So if they're not a follower, it goes to the next person who would have been. Characters not considered part of the camp cannot inherit it, meaning it will never be inherited by any character with a title of their own, though prisoners and wards are valid to this. If no relative is available, the follower with the highest prowess inherits instead, and the camp passes from your dynasty. So that is like the game end state for unlanded characters. If you don't have an heir, the next strongest person basically after you is the person that takes over. And then I guess you'll get that new death screen, and you might be able to play as somebody else from your dynasty, but then your camps will exist with a different ruler, and you'll be able to like watch him and see what they get up to, see what adventures they have, even if you're not controlling them anymore. Although they are locked to this succession, adventurers still do receive some benefits for their independence, gaining access to 2 powerful tools of succession. They may freely designate their valid heir, and they may adopt any successor willing to agree as a child of their own. Children adopted in this fashion join the character's dynasty, but immediately spin off their own new house as a mark of their unorthodox lineage. So I guess you're kind of picking up a child and saying like, yep, you're my heir now, you're part of my house, I'm going to take you under my wing, you're going to be my valid heir, you definitely came from me, and then they take over after you. So as you can see in this next screenshot, adopt as successor. Roussel here becomes designated heir. Roussel becomes part of your dynasty, but will create a new house. So you do this, that person then joins your camp by the looks of it, and then they become your successor once you die. So this is a way to continue the line of your succession by the looks of it. When I said that was the last section of the dev diary, I actually lied. There is, ironically enough, the Forgotten. As they have no lands to use their council tasks on, and because many of the benefits would be simply pointless to them, adventurers do not have council or councillors. Core benefits or mechanics of a council, like a spouse's stat buffs or your spy master catching schemes, are instead taken by your second command, a camp officer available to all. Additionally, unless you have some leverage over them or a truly fantastic reputation, rulers generally won't marry their children into a smelly band of wanderers, no matter how noble some of your band may have been. You cannot even ask them unless they are on your roll of patrons, so you can't ask them anyway. If they're on your roll of patrons, you can ask them, but they're probably going to say no at that point anyway. You must have to have some crazy combination of hooks, prestige, obviously opinion as well, to get them to even think about it, which is good, I think. I don't think it would be good if you could just marry into different houses that easily. Of course, you can work your way up the prestige levels, do a contract for a king, and see if you can squeeze a marriage to yourself or your child out of them, but that's a lot of work, especially if they marry off your intended spouse in the meantime, versus swallowing your pride and simply wedding a peasant. I think most of us are just going to wed a peasant, pick up somebody with good stats or traits, and try to get some successful kind of heirs, if you want to think about it, for your future camp experiences, rather than doing all this work to get a king's daughter or something to marry you. Likewise, adventurers cannot use the invite to camp interaction on anyone but close relations and player heirs. Your camp may pick up many people on the road, but you cannot offer the stable life at court that a landed ruler or admin family can. So a lot of people just aren't going to be interested. You are going to want an extended family, at least somewhere on the map potentially, to really bring into your camp to make it successful in the long term. Although, as they've already shown off, I think there are going to be events and things where you can pick up people along the way as well, which is pretty nice. Finally, and it might be obvious to all of you, you do not use the legitimacy system in any of these adventure mechanics. I mean, that just makes sense, doesn't it? You wouldn't really be able to have, how legitimate of a bandit are you? Well, I suppose you could, but it really would be kind of silly to have that. So that is not applicable at all unless you are landed. And with that, that is the end of part 1 of Unlanded gameplay. Guys, you're going to have to let me know what you think about all of this. There's a lot of information. As I said, I will leave a link to it in the description down below so you can take a reread through it or just rewatch the video. That helps me a lot on YouTube. It makes YouTube think I'm a very good YouTuber. So do make sure you hit that like button. Subscribe if you are new here. I'm covering Crusader Kings on the channel as always, going through all the dev diaries, doing news, live streams, discussion videos, all those kind of things. And do let me know in the comments down below. Do you like what you've seen? Do you not? Do you wish some things were different? I'm actually pretty amazed with how many changes they've made here for this system. As I said at the beginning, I kind of thought it'd just be events and some other minor mechanics, but it is a kind of total rework of a few areas of the game. And the actual gameplay itself looks very different to normal gameplay. So I think it looks awesome, but do let me know in the comments. I will be here, of course, next week with part 2. For the sake of my voice, I hope it's slightly smaller than this week's. I think it will be. I think there's going to be less things to cover, but kind of filling out the bits that they haven't already covered this week. And then we still have quite a few weeks left until the launch of the DLC. So we know we're getting a Scheme Rework Dev Diary. I imagine we'll get one on the achievements maybe. We'll obviously get the patch one the week it comes out. And then before we know it, we will be here playing Roads to Power. Oh, we also actually have the Byzantine additional content Dev Diary as well. That was mentioned in the last Dev Diary, I think, that we are going to get a standalone Dev Diary on the Byzantine specific DLC content. So we do have that to look forward to. But with all that being said, I've kept you long enough, so I'll leave you there for today, and I'll see you in the next one.